In the end, people always reveal who they truly are, but sometimes the revelation comes too late, and by the time the truth surfaces, the damage has already carved itself so deeply into the heart that nothing can scrub away the scar. This was the brutal lesson Adrian Hale learned on the day his wife, Serafina Cross, stood laughing as he packed his life into boxes, unaware that the man she mocked, belittled, and discarded had just secured a private development contract worth $400 million, a deal that would rewrite the future she so confidently believed would collapse without her. The morning she told him he didn't deserve the mansion he built with his bare hands, the morning she called him a useless burden and told him to rot in an abandoned apartment, she had no idea she was pushing away the very man whose rising power would soon determine her fate. Adrian had risen from nothing, a boy from a broken neighborhood who turned steel, glass, and willpower into skyscrapers that kissed the sky, and the sprawling mansion in onyx and marble that glimmered on the hilltop was the deepest expression of his devotion. A place he built for Serafina's comfort, her dreams, her whims, only to discover years later that the woman whose laughter once made him feel invincible now used that same laughter to slice through what remained of his spirit. People said their marriage sparkled, but the truth was that Serafina sparkled while Adrian dimmed, slowly, painfully, invisibly. She basked in luxury while he built the fortune that provided it, unaware that love built on convenience is love waiting to collapse. Business troubles began when several key clients pulled out due to economic shifts, and while Adrian fought tooth and nail to save his company. Helix Structures. Serafina drifted further away, scrolling through her phone late into the night, giggling at messages Adrian never saw, giving excuses wrapped in silk and perfume. He worked longer hours, slept less, bled effort into proposals that vanished unanswered, and sold his cars to keep payroll alive. But every sacrifice he made became another unspoken disappointment to her, each sign of struggle pushing her closer to her secret lover, Damien Voss, a man who entered her life like a whisper and quickly became her escape route. The morning Serafina told Adrian she was pregnant, he believed life had given him a miracle. He imagined nurseries, wooden cribs, fatherhood, and second chances, but she imagined something else entirely, a life without him. He mistook her distance for exhaustion, her coldness for stress, and her late nights for discomfort, not realizing the child she carried wasn't his. Then came the greatest twist of fate. A former client reached out with news of a major development board reviewing contractors for a skyscraper district project, and Adrian walked into that boardroom carrying failure on his shoulders but brilliance in his veins. He presented, defended, argued, and dazzled, and when the handshake came, he felt the world crack open beneath him. Not in destruction, but rebirth. For $100 million. A contract that resurrected everything he thought he had lost. He drove home with joy pounding through his chest, imagining Serafina's tears of happiness, imagining redemption, imagining a future rebuilt. But fate doesn't wait for timing. It strikes where it hurts most. When he opened the mansion door, he didn't find love waiting. He found betrayal stretching across the living room like a staged performance meant to break him. And that moment triggered a chain of events none of them would recover from. Adrian entered the mansion with the weight of triumph in his hands, holding the signed contract that would resurrect his company, his marriage, and his life. But as he walked across the marble floor, once polished by shared dreams, now dulled by secrets, he heard a sound that didn't belong in the home he built. Laughter, soft, intimate, dripping with familiarity. The kind of laughter someone gives only to a person they trust deeply, and as that sound drifted through the hallway, his pulse quickened with dread rather than joy, because no part of that laughter felt like it belonged to him anymore. The air felt wrong, scented with unfamiliar cologne instead of the lavender perfume Serafina favored, and every step Adrian took felt like he was moving toward a truth he wasn't ready to face. A truth carved out of shadows and betrayal. When he turned the corner into the lounge, the world didn't merely break. It collapsed. Serafina was entangled in Damien's arms, lips pressed against his in a kiss that carried history, not spontaneity, and the sight didn't feel like a mistake or a moment. It felt like a confession months in the making. Her hand was on Damien's face, her body curled into his, and the glow in her eyes. The glow Adrian once died to protect, now burned for someone else. The contract folder slipped from his trembling hand, hitting the floor with a dull thud that shattered the silence. And Serafina pulled away from Damien not with shame but with a satisfied smirk, like she had been waiting for this exact moment. Like breaking Adrian was the final step in her transformation. She moved with terrifying calmness, already prepared, already emotionally divorced. And when she stepped toward him holding an envelope, everything inside Adrian twisted violently. He realized she hadn't drifted away. She had relocated her heart entirely. She told him she wanted out of the marriage, not with tears or regret but with rehearsed indifference. And when Adrian asked why now? Why suddenly, why after everything? They weren't even questions born from confusion but from heartbreak. Serafina told him he had nothing left to offer, that Damien was stability, wealth, excitement, everything she deserved, and the mansion Adrian built with his own hands was her compensation for the years she claimed she wasted on him. She said the child she carried needed security, a proper father, a man who didn't fail, didn't struggle, didn't embarrass her with setbacks. It was then Adrian understood the truth. The baby she claimed was his was never meant to be his. Damien's hand slid around her waist like a victory flag, and Serafina leaned into him as if the home Adrian built was nothing more than a stage for their independence. She forced Adrian out of his own mansion with nothing but a box of belongings and divorce papers she had typed, signed, and notarized weeks earlier. The betrayal wasn't a spur-of-the-moment decision. It was a plan she designed carefully, calculatingly, cruelly. And as Adrian walked out of the mansion that evening, carrying the ruins of his dignity while Serafina stood at the doorway gloating, he had no idea that the $400 million contract he held would soon become the very force that turned karma into a storm no one could escape. Adrian Hale walked away from the mansion with the hollow echo of Serafina's laughter haunting every step, each footfall a reminder of the life he built and the love that had vanished like smoke. And yet even as the cool wind slapped against his face and the city lights blurred into streaks of gold and crimson, his hands clenched around the folder containing the $400 million contract, a single piece of paper that carried redemption, power, and a future that she could never touch. The abandoned apartment he now called home was nothing like the mansion. Cold, cracked walls, peeling paint, and a floor that groaned under weight. Yet Adrian felt a strange liberation in the emptiness, a raw canvas upon which he could rebuild everything she had stripped away. And as he unpacked the few belongings he carried, memories assaulted him. The nights he stayed up perfecting blueprints, the moments he had whispered promises of forever, and the faint scent of lavender that lingered in. The mansion now felt like poison in the air of memory, and he reminded himself that love could die without him noticing, that loyalty could be a mask worn by those who only wanted comfort, and that betrayal, when timed perfectly, could hit like a storm no preparation could withstand. But even in the depth of his heartbreak, he felt the first flicker of control, a quiet power that whispered that life's true justice was not in the hands of those who hurt you but in the hands of your own determination. And so Adrian began to work, drawing, planning, drafting proposals late into the night, every pencil stroke a reclamation of dignity, every plan a foundation of vengeance disguised as success, and the city outside, oblivious to the silent revolution brewing in the heart of the man they once called a builder of dreams, carried on unaware as his mind raced, calculating deals, assessing contracts, envisioning the skyscrapers that would rise from nothing, symbols of triumph she could never foresee. And in the shadows of that forsaken apartment, Adrian Hale began to feel not despair but anticipation, a delicious anticipation that karma had its own timing and her smug victory was about to crumble into dust under the weight of the fortune and genius he wielded. And each morning he watched the sun rise over the city, painting streets with light, reminding him that even in loss there was power, that even in exile there was opportunity, that even when the heart breaks it leaves a space large enough for rebirth. And every phone call he made, every client he courted, every meeting he attended alone in his office reminded him that nothing she took could erase the skill, the ambition, and the unwavering drive that had built everything she thought she owned. And somewhere deep inside, a quiet smile formed on his lips as he envisioned the day she would realize that losing him was the only permanent thing she had ever accomplished. Weeks passed in a blur of determination, and Adrian's routine hardened into steel, every day a testament to his refusal to crumble. and as he visited old clients who had once trusted him, presenting ideas sharper, bolder, more innovative than anything before, he felt the subtle shift of power, the magnetic pull of success slowly returning to his side, and the apartment that once smelled of abandonment and dust began to feel like a war room, a command center of strategy and silent revenge, where no betrayal could enter, no laughter could taunt, and every plan he drafted carried the pulse of someone who had been humiliated but refused to be defeated. And yet, as he walked the streets, passing the towering structures he once helped build, he was reminded that Serafina's betrayal was not just emotional but social, the humiliation public, the loss visible to anyone who once admired him, but he turned it all into fuel. Every memory of her words, every smirk, every casual cruelty pushed him to craft the next deal bigger than the last, to secure clients who had ignored him before, and as the first proposals began to convert into tangible contracts, Adrian's confidence grew into a quiet storm that promised disruption, and every night he sat with blueprints sprawling across the table, markers, rulers, and coffee cans littered around, thinking not about the mansion he lost but about the towers, the commercial complexes, the buildings that would bear his name and legacy. And he imagined Serafina seeing them, imagining her smug smile frozen in disbelief, the shock in her eyes as she realized the man she mocked and discarded had never been broken, had only been delayed, and in that delay, had amassed power she could never comprehend. And as the city slept, unaware of the silent reckoning building in the heart of one man, Adrian allowed himself the rare satisfaction of a private thought that every moment of betrayal, every word she spat, every public humiliation she had performed, was about to become the contrast to the life he was about to create. A life so brilliant, so untouchable, that when karma arrived, it would not be a whisper but a thunderclap, reshaping their universe forever. And in those quiet nights, alone but undefeated, he began to map not only structures but futures, his own and hers, the timing precise, the revelation inevitable, and every fiber of his being pulsed with the knowledge that the ultimate twist would belong to him alone. Adrian Hale felt the first real tremor of triumph as the phone calls he had meticulously made turned into signed contracts, each handshake a silent proclamation that betrayal could never define him. And as the city lights flickered against the twilight sky, he realized that success was no longer just survival but a weapon, a way to rewrite every humiliation Serafina had dealt him, and yet the satisfaction was tempered with restraint, because he had learned that vengeance is sweetest when slow, deliberate, and impossible to anticipate. And in the quiet of his apartment, papers spread across the table like battle plans, Adrian traced every line, envisioned every structure rising above streets where once he had walked in shame, and the realization that she had underestimated him at every turn filled him with a quiet fire, the kind that could not be snuffed by laughter or scorn. And each night he drifted to sleep only to wake early, the first rays of sun spilling over the cracked walls, reminding him that time was a currency she had squandered, and while she enjoyed fleeting moments of smugness, he invested each hour into tangible proof of brilliance, building structures, ideas, networks, alliances, every stone a testament to resilience, every blueprint a declaration of undying ambition. And as the first major building proposal came through, valued at millions more than any project he had previously touched, Adrian allowed himself a private smile, imagining the moment she would learn not all losses are permanent, and that sometimes the abandoned, the laughed at, the underestimated, are the very ones who rise to control the game entirely. And as he drove through streets that mirrored his ascent from despair, he thought of the mansion, the opulent home that once symbolized love and dedication now twisted in memory, a monument to her mistake, and he felt no bitterness, only the deep, calm satisfaction that comes from knowing life scales balance in ways the arrogant never see coming. And in the stillness of the night, he traced the face of the man who had once been broken, whispering a vow that the ultimate revelation, the final confrontation, would unfold not in anger but in the undeniable display of power and dignity, and somewhere between exhaustion and determination. He realized that the story of betrayal, humiliation, and secret triumph was about to reach a crescendo so sharp, so shocking, that the world itself would pause to witness, and every sleepless night, every underestimated skill, every unacknowledged effort had been leading him to this one point of reckoning, where the man discarded would become the force no one, not even Serafina, could ignore. The weeks blurred into months as Adrian Hale transformed his life into a machine of precision and purpose, each client meeting a masterstroke, each proposal an assertion of dominance. And while the city slept unaware of the storm building quietly in the corner office, Adrian felt a thrill only those who have been betrayed know, the mix of fear, exhilaration, and a hunger that could not be sated by small victories. And as he signed his first multi-million-dollar contract, the reality sank in, that every slight, every insult, every moment she had believed him powerless, had only fueled the ascent of a man no humiliation could contain, and yet Adrian's approach was measured, not reckless. He understood that karma is not about public spectacle but inevitability, and in every blueprint he drafted, every strategic alliance he formed, he wove a silent narrative of triumph that no one could interrupt. And as news of his contracts began to spread quietly, the whispers of his resurgence reached the ears of people who once dismissed him, investors curious, developers cautious, and Serafina remained oblivious, basking in the false security she had crafted around herself and Damien, thinking the man she abandoned was broken beyond repair. But every brick Adrian planned, every structure he envisioned, carried the weight of her miscalculation, and in the nights when he sat alone staring at the city skyline, he allowed himself to imagine the moment when her confidence would shatter, when she would see the man she mocked standing tall, untouchable, and financially unstoppable. And with each heartbeat, he felt not just victory approaching but the poetic justice that only comes to those who endure, adapt, and outlast betrayal. And the excitement that pulsed through his veins was not anger but the pure, cold clarity that life's ultimate truths unfold not in haste but in relentless, unwavering strategy. And as he mapped every next move, ensuring that every aspect of his resurgence was airtight, Adrian embraced the solitude, the struggle, and the silent satisfaction that one day soon, the world and Serafina herself would witness the impossible, the shocking, the story of a man who rose from absolute despair into power and awe, a force of nature disguised as patience, cunning, and brilliance. The day came when Adrian Hale returned to the mansion, not as the man humiliated, not as the man discarded, but as a force she could not deny, the $400 million contract in hand. His presence a living declaration that power, perseverance, and silent determination are sharper than any words of cruelty. And as he stepped through the familiar door, the echoes of the past brushing against his skin, he felt the surreal mix of nostalgia and triumph, memories of love and betrayal, twisting together in an almost painful clarity. And in the grand hall, Serafina froze, her eyes widening not with joy or relief, but with shock and disbelief. The confidence she had wielded as a weapon now shattered in an instant, and Damien, who had always seemed untouchable in his arrogance, faltered, realizing that the man they had underestimated, mocked, and discarded had grown beyond their imagination, beyond their control. And Adrian's gaze swept across the mansion, seeing not loss but conquest, not despair but opportunity. And as he laid the contract on the marble table, the room seemed to hum with inevitability, the weight of karma settling like dust on every surface. And Serafina's voice trembled, her laughter vanished, replaced by desperate pleas and apologies that rang hollow against the symphony of his victory. And Adrian stood calm, a silent storm of dignity, every muscle, every fiber, every plan culminating in this single moment. The twist so precise that it left no doubt, no loophole, no escape, that the man she discarded had rewritten fate itself. And as he walked past the rooms they once shared, imagining the child she claimed would someday know the truth of resilience and justice, Adrian realized that the true triumph was not the mansion reclaimed or the fortune amassed but the quiet, undeniable power of a life rebuilt on patience, brilliance, and unshakable will. And in the end, as she watched, stripped of arrogance, stripped of confidence, stripped of illusions, Adrian Hale did not gloat but radiated a presence that spoke louder than words, a reminder that those who survive betrayal, endure humiliation, and refuse to break always rise to a climax that is shocking, unforgettable, and permanently etched in memory.